It's estimated that 90% of California school budgets are consumed by employee salaries and benefits. And everyone would agree that it's important that we conserve the remainder of the money for essential expenditures. One way to save money is to have a cost-effective workers' comp program, which can save the district a significant amount of money every year. Let me introduce Dennis Chandler. Dennis is the director of the Injury Management Program for Company Nurse, an organization which has developed a return-to-work program for school districts and other organizations. Dennis has over 29 years in the work injury management field, where he's concentrated his efforts on public entities. Dennis is also a return-to-work consultant for Schools Insurance Authority. Dennis is here to discuss the day of injury and what can happen subsequent to that injury. Nice to have you with us today.
Thank you.
Let me ask, first of all, when we talk about injury and employees injured, the day of injury, why is the day of injury so important?
Well, it's a critical time. So the employer's response to that employee's incident or injury shapes the whole nature, duration, and cost of that claim. So let me give you an example.
Okay.
In the state of California, if an employee is off 3 days from work due to a work injury, they're in an indemnity claim. Those claims now average almost $60,000 over the life of that claim. So it's not as simple as an injury today, treatment today, and then back to work. Workers' comp claims have a life of their own. Several of these claims can go on for years.
So let me ask then, there must be some challenges to the district on the day the injury occurs. Some things must happen. So what are those challenges to the district on that actual day of injury?
Well, first it starts with the employees. Some employees today, due to not wanting to call attention to themselves, may not even report an injury. So that may be a situation that's lying to get worse. Secondly, supervisors and employees gathering that information may not be comprehensive enough for the claims examiners, for the medical users. And thirdly, just getting that filed in a timely basis, getting the paperwork completed. There was a recent study done by the Hartford that showed that claims that are reported late as compared to claims that are reported on time, the cost differences. So from 1 week to a month, that claims reported late can cost 18 to 45% more. So that lag time in reporting is a key cost driver. So number one challenge is getting the injury reported immediately on the day of injury.
I can see those are challenges, I guess you would call them at the administrative level, but let's talk a little bit about the challenges which I must assume come at a medical management level as well.
Yeah. The first is the decision to seek treatment or not. So imagine that you're a supervisor, your employee comes to you and reports that they've tweaked their shoulder and asks you the question, what do you think I ought to do, Jim? So obviously the default is, yep, you better get that checked out. So what we see in workers' comp a lot is the tendency to over-treat, that we have this mentality of, yes, we better get that checked out. When in many cases, as we'll talk about soon, that's not necessary for treatment. Or we have people not seeking the appropriate level of treatment. They're seeking treatment at an emergency room, which that treatment could be performed at an occupational or urgent clinic. The other thing about medical management is under-treatment, that employees not treating, thinking that, oh, it's a minor situation, it'll go away. So we don't have, in most cases, a medical professional that's interacting with the employee, helping them make that decision on what is the appropriate level of care.
Given these challenges, both at the administrative level and the medical level, what, in your opinion, then, is the best approach that a district could take to move the correct way?
SIA has one of the most unique programs, not only for schools, but for any organization in this country. They fronted the workers' comp process with a registered nurse. So it's a nurse hotline, so to speak. So it takes that supervisor out of that medical decision process. So the situation is employee has an incident or injury, reports to their supervisor, and calls the SIA registered nurse. The nurse and the employee triage that injury to determine the most appropriate level of care. This program went into effect a few years ago. We knew there was something unique about this program. In the first month, 40% of those callers calling in work incidents and injuries did not go on for further medical treatment. And that has continued for several years. Actually, there was a day of injury study done by the Public Entity Risk Institute because of this program.
So let's take to the next step. These initial steps have been taken care of administratively and medically. So after that, what are the challenges that are faced by the district when the employee is then released back for work for modified or restricted duty?
This is where the partnership comes in between the districts and SIA. And I'd like to back up a little bit and talk about the principles of return to work. So
Okay.
organizations that have a culture, an expectation of bringing their employees back to perform work while they're recovering from injury, those organizations get their employees back to full duty twice as fast. So that's remarkable in terms of, one, the employee is performing productive work, and two, returning to full duty twice as fast. You can imagine what that does to the cost of a claim. Also, one of the advantages of getting that employee back to their work home, so to speak, is litigation rates go down. So SIA enjoys a litigation rate that's about 1/3 of the average litigation rates in the state of California.
Now, there must be, I would assume, advantages to the employee or the injured worker being back at work and staying at work. Let's talk about that for just a moment.
Okay. Well, and first let's talk about the process of getting that employee back to work. They come back from medical treatment. They have a work restriction, work evaluation from a physician that might say workers restricted from 10 pounds lifting, no repetitive bending, twisting, sit and stand as appropriate.
Sure.
The district's response to that work restriction written by a doctor is critical here. Understanding that getting that employee back and performing productive work is the key. It's the key to the recovery. It's the key to cost, control on workers' comp. What SIA has done for that is they've erased that whole man or no man attitude, 100% or nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And, last I looked at age 25, I kind of dropped off at 100%. So what SIA did in their structured return to work program was they analyzed every aspect of bringing people back in modified duty throughout all of their operations, whether it's custodial or teachers, and came up with 100 different temporary work assignments. So there is a blueprint for bringing people back to work for modified duty, and SIA is there to assist the districts in doing this. Now, to the advantages of the employee coming back, we're a society that values work. We define ourselves by work. Mm-hmm. And the definition that you get by I'm on disability, I'm on workers' comp, is really not a self-fulfilling one. So what we see is employees do want to come back to work. They want to be productive, and in doing that, we find that their recovery, their medical treatment, and their ultimate return to full duty is, again, twice as fast if the district doesn't offer this type of response.
Well, given those sets of circumstances, let's talk a moment about the responsibilities of the district in returning an employee back to work.
Well, first off, everything needs to be reported. It's simple. Call the nurse. So encourage employees to call in all incidents, whether it's an injury or not. There's something to be learned by that. Secondly, the nurse and the employee will determine the appropriate level of care. If that employee, after seeing a physician, has work restrictions, meet with that employee, evaluate those work restrictions, and use SIA, their return to work specialist, to evaluate what is an appropriate task, temporary work assignment, that we could bring this employee back to so they're not at risk for re-injury and they're performing something productive. And if problems occur, use the SIA claims and return to work specialists to help clarify physicians' restrictions or meet with employees to determine problems in the return to work process. But ultimately what we have seen is this is a huge factor to getting productive people back to full duty and saving costs.
Now, you've touched on some of these things, but can we sort of summarize kind of an ABCD thing on the process involved on some of the points you just talked about so they're fresh in our minds?
Yeah. Well, this has been a transformative program for SIA in that we've taken a process that has been involved in a manual paperwork process, and we put in a telephonic nurse triage process to gather better information, to assist the employee in medical decisions and appropriate level of medical care, and to work with the districts when those employees cannot return to full duty in managing that employee's recovery back to full duty. So it's pretty simple. Call the nurse, have a return to work culture at the district, look at those temporary work assignments that have been developed in advance of that injury. We know where the injuries are going to occur. We just don't know to who at this point. So having that, and then work with the claims group and the SIA specialist to get that person back to full duty.
Dennis, this is very, very informative. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you.
We appreciate that information. Additional information and resource links are available at the bottom right portion of the screen. And for more information on this and other programs for your district, please visit the Schools Insurance Authority website at sia-jpa.org or call area code 916-364-1281. Thank you for your time.